You're listening to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that's all about the gambling industry. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about our very, very special sponsors. Something for you to think about, perhaps, while you listen. Do you never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips? Perhaps you need to think about talking to Every Matrix and their new product, Odds Matrix. It's not just some white label solution, it's a turnkey solution. And that's why more and more providers are turning to them to do what they do, to bring their love. Perhaps you're caught in a trap. Can't walk out? Love me too much, baby? If that's the case, maybe you'd like to speak to Optimove, another of our esteemed sponsors. Optimove's specialism is CRM software, and they are the leading provider of this in the iGaming industry. And we love them. We love them. Perhaps you've seen a faded sign at the side of the road while heading down the Atlanta highway, looking for the love getaway. Perhaps that sign said, Ice Barcelona 2025. Because that sign could have been put there by Clarion Gaming, our third and final sponsor. On to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast. I'm your host, John Bruford. I'm flying solo this week, enjoying what my parents used to refer to as a ménage à une. Well, not entirely a ménage à une, because I'm joined in this fluffy marital bed of the Gambling Files podcast by Mr. Matt Smith, the Director of External Affairs for Bet No More. Now, Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. Good to see you.
Finton unfortunately couldn't be here. He's being a busy executive he's having a sabbatical year, but he seems to be busier than I've ever seen him. So that's obviously a good sabbatical. Well, first question, Bet No More. Every single time I say the name, I think of top rock band Faith No More. There's no relation, is there?
Not as far as I'm aware, but I'll have to check in with our CEO Frankie and see if he has any affinity to them whatsoever.
I would appreciate that, and I think so would listeners to the Gambling Files podcast.
Yeah, I think though, to be honest, Frankie was probably a bit more of a raver than a rocker.
Well, Faith No More famously did many crossover sort of song, a lot of very varied musical styles. So maybe there is something that I don't know. But if you could, inquiring minds want to know. I was lucky enough to see Faith No More live at the Roundhouse just before COVID. And I remember walking out and thinking, well, that didn't last very long, did it? Because they played for like 80 minutes or whatever. And then I thought, actually, to be fair, it's, 4 or 5 guys in their 60s playing a really intense set for, 80 minutes. I think they did pretty well. Let's not be too harsh. Just because Springsteen can do 3 hours doesn't mean everybody can.
Yeah.
Anyway. So it's where do we start? So the reason that we're talking today, right? The reason I wanted to get you on the podcast was I saw a post that you did on LinkedIn, and then that often leads us to guests because it's interesting, especially when people do very personal things. And this was quite a personal post. So recently you hit, I kind of want to say a big birthday a bit, but it's a big anniversary and quite a milestone. Could you share what that is?
Yeah, hit 10 years in recovery from gambling and in sobriety. So big milestone. More people celebrated that than they do my birthday. I've got more cards on my desk here than I do for my belly button birthday.
To be fair, I can understand that because your birthday is just a thing that you get because you happen to still be alive.
Yeah.
Whereas this is dragging yourself out of the shit and back to life, and that's a little different, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an emotional week, to be honest with you, John. Lots of stuff happening, lots of celebration, lots of reflection. Talking to people who were in the middle of it. Were in the middle of my gambling harm, and almost reminiscing with them about it, but in a really positive way now. The fact that I've kind of overcome that and doing the work that we're doing now, not only the work that we're doing as a charity, but my own kind of personal mission and personal development and professional development, how I've developed as a person and how I've been able to get a career back on track again, has been, a really proud moment for me and the people around me. And I think the one thing that I'm really proud of in all of this is that I've been able to connect with many different people over the past few years, particularly throughout the whole of our sector. Whether that's through other treatment providers, whether that's through regulators, whether that's through operators, and on the global stage as well. I've been traveling quite a lot to North America over the past 12 months and being able to talk to them about my story and also about the work we're doing and how we utilize stories like mine to support organizations moving forwards has been a full circle moment, if I'm honest, John. And I've been blown away by all of the support from all different areas of the sector.
Okay. Certainly, big congratulations from us. I know the sobriety one, although not 10 years, just 6 for me. But
Still, that's
yeah,
admirable.
it's difficult. I mean, any type of addiction is difficult because of the way that everything around us is geared towards non-addicts. And that's not a complaint, because addicts are generally in a minority, but the way that some behaviors are normalized, well, from this side of the fence, it blows my mind quite a bit, quite frequently.
Yeah.
Especially being English. I mean, we mark everything by getting pissed. For
Well,
American listeners,
exactly.
that is obviously getting drunk. There are language barriers, mate. It's a real thing. So I'd like to go right back. What was your life before starting the path to recovery? What did you do for a living, for example? Presumably you weren't working for Bet No More then.
No, I wasn't. No, I had quite an interesting career, I guess, John. Well, not everybody would be interested, but I guess quite a few. So I worked in sports broadcasting for about 14 years. 12 years I spent as part of the senior production team at TalkSport, the radio station, where I was the program manager and headed up live sports events and broadcasts from around the world, which was fantastic, which was very enjoyable. Some of the highlights were the 2006 World Cup in Germany, the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, and 2 Rugby World Cups in France 2007 and New Zealand 2011, and various other sported events such as the British Open and Cheltenham and Aintree and all of the other stuff, the Grand National, and many Champions League games and Premier League games. And that was my role, was to head all that up in terms of the organisation and the production, make sure everything ran smoothly. And I worked with some wonderful colleagues, and we were lucky enough to win a Sony Gold Award for Radio Station of the Year, I think in 2011, and got the radio station to a place where it is now, which is over 3 million listeners a week, and it's absolutely flying. So, yeah, really enjoyable career. I worked with some top talent. Some of them are still my friends today, I'm proud to say, and one of them was here with me over the past few days, celebrating my my celebration. And it was nice that he was able to come because he was somebody who was affected by my gambling. So it's nice that we still talk today. So that was the bulk of my career. And then I went on and did some other jobs after that, where I worked in Singapore for a little while and helped to set up a sports radio station there. And then I went and worked for a production company, supporting their work around the World Cup in Brazil in 2014. I had a really enjoyable career in the sports broadcasting world, a completely different world to the gambling sector.
It is, but I mean, I know this isn't, I'm not comparing apples to apples here, but the publishing industry, any journalism industry, comes with drinking culture, and comes with high pressure situations and situations where you will blow off steam afterwards, stroke celebrate or whatever. And it's cultural. So I get how something can grow during that. I get you. I mean, when you started talking about that, I'm like, yeah, that totally tracks. What you were surrounded by. And I'm not being critical of anybody that you worked with at all. It's cultural, and it is. It's across publishing and it's across broadcast, because I've worked in both as well, and it's it's just there. It's just there.
It is, John. And just to pick up on that, you're absolutely right. It is cultural. And I was talking about this to my friend who was here the other day, that we would regularly, like daily, go to the pub after work, on a daily basis, and spend several hours there. And that was my life when I lived in London, because I didn't have any friends outside of work. I found it a very lonely life, working in that environment, and lots of highs and lows. You're at major sports events for 4 or 5 weeks, such as a World Cup, surrounded by 20, 25 of your colleagues, and then you come home to nothing. So there's a serious, you drop off a cliff when you come back, and you can feel very low for weeks on end. And that's when you start to use other things as coping mechanisms to get through those difficult situations.
Yeah, very, very fair. And it's amazing what sobriety does for perspective, right? Because when you're pissed up drunk, it's kind of hard to figure shit out. I certainly found that. So what everybody has a different point where they think, hang on a second, I've got to sort this shit out. What was that point for you?
Oh, John, I'd lost my job, and I couldn't even hold down any kind of freelance jobs. Drinking and gambling was out of control for me, so it was very difficult. And when you work in a small world like broadcasting as well, word gets around pretty quickly about one's behaviour and so forth. And that was, quite challenging. So I actually had nowhere to live. First of all, I got back from Brazil in 2014, where I'd been working as a contractor. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything. I had one bag of clothes. And I hadn't spoken to my own mother for about a year and a half at that point, because I was so ashamed and embarrassed about my behaviour and about my gambling and the destruction that I'd caused through that. And so I reached out to somebody who I hadn't spoken to for about 15 years and said, I need somewhere to stay for the night, blah, blah, blah. Haven't seen you for a long time. How about come and visit type thing? And they ended up staying there for about 2 months in the end. But it was a very difficult place to stay. There was lots of behaviour going on there, which was not good for me. And I woke up one morning and I'd been sleeping on in a spare bedroom, if you like, but on like one of those camp beds that you get that you put in a tent, that are literally just like 6 inches off the floor. And I'd been sleeping on there for a few months. And I just woke up one morning thinking, I don't want to live like this anymore. I've had enough. I've just had enough. I wasn't showering. My mental health had deteriorated. I had no income. I had no hope. I had no hope. I had nobody to talk to. I was completely and utterly isolated. So what had happened is 2 years previous, I'd spoken to a gentleman by the name of Paul Spanger. Paul runs the Providence Project here in Bournemouth, where I'm talking to you from. It's a treatment centre for alcohol, but they do some stuff around gambling as well and drugs. And I contacted Paul, said, "Do you remember me?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "I need help." And he said, "Come." And that's what I did 10 years ago last week, and I'm still here today.
So was the start of your recovery tackling alcohol?
I think it was both at the same time, to be honest. I think like I'm very lucky that my sobriety date and my gambling free date are exactly the same day. But I
It
know
saves you ink in your diary, doesn't it?
Well, it does, John, but not only that. Like, I know people who have really struggled with one or the other for years and, not managed to get a handle on either.
Yeah.
Those two things, for me, neither of them were the actual problem. They were both symptoms. Those were the things that I used as a crutch to prop me up. So yeah, I kind of tackled them at the same time. Went into treatment center. I wasn't at the point where I didn't have to detox or anything like that. I went to the doctors, who the doctors was attached to the treatment center. They had a connection with each other. And I went in and seen a doctor, Dr. Turnbull. And I spoke to Dr. Turnbull, and he said, "What are you here for, Matt?" And I said, "Alcohol and gambling." He said, "Well, I know how you feel because I'm 25 years sober," or whatever it was, something like that. And I immediately felt a connection, John, because I felt that somebody was sharing something with me from a profession that I'm sure everybody listening will agree is a profession that we hold in high regard, somebody like a doctor who looks after us. And I felt that connection. I thought, this isn't just me. I'm not alone. And once I felt like that, I thought there's a way forwards here.
Got to take you back just a step there, though. So they were the symptoms, and if you don't want to answer this, that is more than fine. What was the problem?
Me. And how I think. And you said something earlier, and it kind of resonated with me a little bit, about that kind of being sober. And there's the old saying is the truth comes out when you're drunk. Well, I'd argue actually the truth comes out when you're sober.
Yeah,
and that's when you find the real you.
I've never held any stock in that truth comes out when you're drunk thing. That's bollocks.
Yeah.
Because alcohol is transformative and very rarely in a good way.
Exactly. So I was the problem in the way that I was thinking. I call it stinking thinking, John. I couldn't think clearly about things. I had almost like that kind of cognitive dissonance. I was I'd felt so kind of stressed and anxious from my work previously, but also then that turned into all the financial harms through gambling and the debt that I'd incurred and the people that I owed money to and all of those types of things got me into a place where, I was felt very isolated, very anxious, very depressed. My mental health had really suffered. So, quite often I say today when I go to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting that I don't have a gambling problem today. I haven't gambled for over 10 years, but I still have a me problem, which I'm dealing with on a daily basis. That's what I'm working on, my own personal development and how I think. And thankfully, my thinking is a lot better today. And I know that because people actually want to talk to me today, John, like your good self.
I am a sign of quality.
You are. You are the barometer of quality.
And anybody that's listening to this that's met me knows that that's not true. It's interesting, though. Interesting. One of the, I think I'm just going to talk about the UK for a second here, but this has broader relevance and applications. But we were having a conversation last week about how gambling is not the problem in isolation, and it is generally treated as though it is. I don't mean in treatment. I mean it's treated by its critics as though it's the problem by itself. When in fact, an interagency approach to gambling treatment is, and I'm no expert, but it seems to me that it's the only sensible way forward. Because I remember talking to, oh no, she's a fantastic, fantastic person from Gordon Moody's. I can't remember the lady's name. But she said to me, one of the main drivers for gambling issues among women is domestic abuse. And you think, well, if that's a massive driver, if all you're treating is the gambling addiction, you're absolutely pissing in the wind, because you're getting nowhere without getting to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that, because we're not talking about, having a problem with the color yellow. We're talking about problems that need specialist attention, support, sometimes social support, and all of the things that go. We're talking about areas where lots of experts might be needed a little bit, and I don't think that gets recognized nearly enough. Certainly not by the industry's critics.
No, you have to have an holistic approach, John. It has to be, like the work that we do at Bet No More. You have to bring all of the factors together. And if you just treat the gambling in isolation, then there is a big chance you're going to miss something else is going on. And when you lay blame firmly at the door of just gambling, you're going to miss something else that's going on. And that is where I get quite concerned, because for me, and as I've shared about my sobriety, that, if you said that my mental health and my behaviour was solely at the door of the gambling industry, then you would miss the harm that I had caused myself and to others through alcoholism. So you have to have a joined up approach to it. You have to look at it from all different angles, and if you solely put the blame somewhere, and also what you're doing as well is, if you're putting the blame on gambling at the gambling industry, then in turn that is putting the blame on the individual. It's putting the blame back on the individual. So I get very concerned by that, and I think that we have to have that holistic approach, and we have to have a look at it from lots of different angles.
Funny thing though, and I definitely don't mean funny, haha. An awful lot of the and stop me if this is the wrong expression to use, because I actually use this one quite a lot, so I'd love to be corrected if it is wrong. I usually describe them as comorbidities. The comorbidities that come with gambling addiction are also the issues that generally face people in poverty or borderline in poverty. And so one of the frequent criticisms of the industry is, oh, you're targeting this, that, and the other person, but actually that's not necessarily the right way around to look at that. And a very dear friend of mine used to say, until you tackle poverty, trying to tackle everything else is pointless. And it's a pretty fair argument, although how you tackle poverty, I have no clue. Although, not building HS2 in the UK would have been a fucking great start. But, it's people in poor areas. And here's the other thing, right? Here's the other thing. You used the word hopeless earlier. One of the things that gambling brings to people who have, for want of a better expression, a disordered form of thinking, is it brings the illusion of hope. Until that race is over, until that match is over, there's still a chance that this could come in. There's still a chance this could get me out of the shit, this could do this, that, and the other. The lottery ticket, well, when I get up in the morning, there'll be an email waiting for me or whatever. It's this little, and it's not necessarily realistic. It's the oh, man, I don't know where to start. I don't even know if there's a question in there, Matt.
Well, look, let me step in there. I think that one thing, you're right. Poverty. We live in a country, John, like the UK, where there is becoming an increasing wealth divide. So first of all, you need to look at that. You've got people who are earning stupid amounts of money and people who are earning very, very little. So you need to look at that. And people, I think, particularly during COVID, although they were getting support, would have felt a lot of fear and would have felt terrified about how they were going to manage their finances, how they were going to pay their bills. So perhaps there are people who turn to other ways of trying to make money through that period. I don't actually see that we've seen people yet who maybe started gambling during COVID and have now experienced harm. I don't think we're seeing those people yet. I think we will at some point. But I don't think because I don't think, in my mind, and look, there may be an argument otherwise, that there would have been people turning to gambling as a form of entertainment during COVID. I pretty much feel that they would have been turning to gambling to try to supplement their income, because that would have been the primary driver. The primary concern would have been, what am I going to do to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my mortgage? I've been laid off from work. Yes, I'm getting some furlough money, but I'm not getting the full amount that I'm normally paid. So I don't think there would have been a swathe of people coming through who think, actually, I'm not working at the moment. I'd like to gamble for entertainment. Well, you haven't really got the money to, because you're only getting 75% of your income through furlough. So actually, those people would have been looking to supplement another way. And I don't think we've seen those people yet. So when you've got situations like that and huge life-changing events like COVID, that is going to upset people, and it's going to have an impact on individuals and their families and friends and whoever in ways that we probably didn't think were even possible.
It's a good shout. And that's the thing, right? Having this conversation with yourself. Here's the thing. I know that a lot of people make noise about lived experience in the industry. But in the position that you're in with Bet No More, you're in a position where you can have real influence on treatment and approaches to, and on perception of, etc. And for me, that's like, how can I put this? I'm going back friggin' too many years now. Probably this is probably I don't know, 8-9 years ago. Just having a conversation with a guy who's probably very kind to animals, and he was complaining about somebody wanting to build some houses near the village he lives in. And there was no way it was going to go through. It was an application for building on greenbelt land, although it was on a private estate. And he was absolutely up in arms about the idea of these homes being built. And I just said to him, "You've never been fucking homeless, have you?" He said, "Well, no." I said, "Well, if you were in some kind of insecure housing situation, you would know that in this area there is an unbelievable need for housing. I mean, unreal. And you might have a different approach to this. And if it's just your fucking view that gets ruined, then I'm going to have to vote in favor of these. If I get a chance to vote, I'm voting yes, build the fucking houses." And that's the thing. Like, people have got attitudes about homelessness and poverty, etc. Like, I've been homeless. Or there are times where I've had a home and I've had so little money. I've never actually said this on the podcast before. I've had so little money, I've had to eat what people have left behind, after a night out. Like, I'll go out early in the morning and pick up fucking kebabs off cars and things. because I had like £6 to last me for 2 weeks, including all of my electricity, etc. I mean, it was just absolutely desperate. And so I have a different take on these things to what people who've never had to worry about a meal have. And there are an awful lot of people, some of whom are working in RG, an awful lot of which have big influence in RG. And while they might be working from a very honest perspective, they don't have that experience of landing on their ass right at the bottom and having to look around and having to talk to the people they love and having to say, I really fucked up. I'm so sorry.
Oh, completely. You need empathy, first of all. That's what you need to be able to be in somebody else's shoes and feel what they felt. And you talked about homelessness, John, and, you know, I've been homeless as well. And it can happen to anybody. You know, any one of us can become vulnerable, and it can happen to anybody. So I would always say to people, you know, please try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is very difficult if you haven't experienced the same thing yourself. That is where lived experience comes in. Start to listen to those stories. Remember that lived experience is a broad church. So there are lots of different people. There are some people who are doing some advocacy work, who are doing campaigning work, doing support work. There are people who are working with regulators, people who are working with the industry, whatever which way they feel that they want to work to make RG better for the future, is that's what they're doing. And, you know, I think that we need more people like from the lived experience community. And there are people who I've met across the RG space who I feel genuinely want to make a difference. There are others who I hear, we've got these tools, they're fantastic. Well, whoopie-do. Everybody's got tools. Everybody advertises GamStop, GamBan, all of these things. What are you doing that is going above and beyond? And what are your outcomes from that? That's what I want to know. And I think that we just talked about this the other day. There's a lot of, I hear a lot of PR spin. And it's a little bit like, I want to look under the bonnet. Let's have a look under the bonnet outside of, I worked in media for 15 years, John. I can see PR spin just like that, you know? Let's get beyond that and let's have a look under the bonnet and what's going on. And actually, I think that some of the best RG work that's been done is probably actually not even being spoken about because it just gets sucked up in all of the noise.
Like what? You can't leave me hanging like that. You've got to give me an example of
That's another episode. That's another episode. But no, I think that there are areas of the industry. I don't want to single any operator out in particular, but
you
I
can
think
name them. We don't mind.
No, I'd rather not. But I think that I maybe on the next episode. But I've, you know, from talking to people where you feel that you're having a very authentic, honest conversation about this, you do then start to feel, actually, I think these people really do care about what they're doing. What I don't want to hear is, you know, I go to lots of conferences, John, you know, and I hear them pushing out the same message about RG. It's the same thing again and again and again, and it's all marketing, it's all PR spin. In the US, it's all legal spin. And you know what I do think in the UK, thankfully, is that we have got more authenticity around this stuff and regular conversations happening. And you know, for example, I won't even need to mention the operator's name, but the Journey to Zero that they run is a very, very good. Is a very good thing that they're trying to, you know, get to a point of zero profit from gambling harm. So I think that if you look at those types of things, there is some real genuine projects being done and genuine work, but it does take a little bit of looking under the bonnet of what is happening.
You said you're traveling to the US a lot. You're doing a lot of conferences and appearances and talks to folks. This might sound like a strange question, but what is the Matt Smith story for the US? I mean, is there something in particular that you focus on with that story, or do you find that people respond to a particular aspect of it?
Yeah, so I'm working with my colleague Marlene Warner, the chief executive of the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health, who have just hosted over here in the UK for the last few days. And we're working Bet No More and the Mass Council on the Gambling Recovery Information Network. And that project is basically a team of lived experience individuals who are working in various different areas, whether that is from peer support to focus groups with regulators, and making sure that the voice of lived experience is being heard and is being amplified. And if you look, for example, from a regulatory perspective, the UK Gambling Commission has been leading the way on this piece of work for several years now through the Lived Experience Advisory Panel. And they've had this running for a while now, where they have people who've been affected by gambling harm as an individual or as an affected other. They actually have somebody who is the lived experience manager who's looking after this group of people in a full-time role. So they are really dedicated to this work. Bet No More supported them in a couple of ways as well, with various training pieces as well, using our own experience of experts by experience, if you like. And we're hoping that we can take that model and we can drop it into North America and in other countries around the world, so that regulators can understand lived experience, and regulators aren't just making sure that everything works how it's supposed to work, but it's actually the primary role, I would hope, of a regulator is to protect people. Is to protect the people that are playing the games, that we're safeguarding those individuals. And if you're utilising the voice of lived experience to support that piece of work and to make sure that you're doing everything possible to make sure that there's a duty of care in place, that the players are being protected, then I think that is super important. And that means that we can reduce gambling harm, which is what our mission is. So we're hoping that very soon we'll start actually doing the work in the US. Marlene and I have been talking about it at various conferences. We were recently in Vancouver at the New Horizons conference, which was brilliant. A really, really good conference with a lot of buy-in from lots of different areas of the sector. And I think that this piece of work can move forwards. This piece shouldn't be a one and done, John. It shouldn't be, I go in, talk about my lived experience, share my story with everybody for half an hour and then leave. This should be an ongoing piece of work. And that's where I think the Gambling Recovery Information Network piece can do a lot more, because it can bring folks together. It can work together with different areas of the sector, and it can help them to understand lived experience. It can help them to understand what harmful products are, the effect those products have on people, and ultimately make it a safer place and a more sustainable industry.
It's impossible to argue with anything you said there, and that's not what I'm here for anyway. It is worth pointing out, though, that the Americans are really, really good at acronyms.
Yes, they are. And I've completely avoided using the acronym that we have for Gambling Recovery Information Network. You can figure out what the acronym is if you like, because I keep saying to my colleague Marlene, who I absolutely love to bits, by the way, stop using the acronym because nobody will know what it means. So that's why I'm not using it.
I like it, because I'm often very disappointed when people haven't thought their group name through. Acronym first, group name from the acronym. That's the way it should be if you want really good sound bites, I think.
Yeah.
And you're going to get them with that, Matt. You're going to get them with that. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to upset you. But no, fabulous, Matt. Thank you so much for sharing your story and speaking so honestly. And we'd definitely like to have you back at some future point, because there's stuff to talk about, basically.
Oh, there is. And there's going to be a lot more to talk about, I think, over the next 12 months. So I look forward to chatting to you more.
Well, yeah, okay. I was going to say I'll wait with bated breath, but I'm not baiting anything. Matt Smith, Director, External Affairs, Bet No More. As far as we know, unaffiliated to Faith No More, but there might be a good sponsorship thing there. Maybe you could get him to do a bit of a theme tune for you. Huh?
Yeah. Do you have the royalties to their music, John? Can you roll a bit in at the end of this podcast or no?
Matt, I need to take you back to the bit where I was talking about being homeless and hungry. No, I don't have any of their publishing rights, I'm afraid. And I think if I did, I'd probably still be poor.
Yeah.
But anyway, Matt, thank you. Nice to see you.